Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, so much attention being paid to the Lakers roster, but the Lakers on Tuesday made a critical move for their coaching staff. We'll explain next on Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. Sometimes on weekends, always when news breaks, we've got fresh Lakers content ready to go for you. Never behind a paywall, always free. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to get the podcast a little early, particularly on non-game nights. That's also where breaking news will be posted first, our reaction to it and all that good stuff. Thanks to everybody for supporting that channel. It's really grown way faster than we thought it would.
Told you, and you don't even know what it is yet, but we have got a very big approaching milestone, hopefully over the next couple weeks or so, but very excited about it, and I am continuing to keep you in suspense.
Is it the most downloads on YouTube, like in totality? Because that would be
yes.
I thought we were doing well.
Yeah, we did. We just passed Double Rainbow Guy.
He's done remarkably well for himself.
Yeah, we passed him. We're now number 2 on YouTube's entire history.
This is how old we are. We don't know who like the YouTube stars are. It is not the Double Rainbow Guy. Like Double Rainbow is still not at the top of the charts.
Well, no, but just cumulative. I mean, like he had a long stretch before anything else was on YouTube that he was all you went to see. Like it was. Yeah,
that's true.
But I mean, he was back like when old TV, there was only 3 channels. He was the finale of MASH. That guy for a long time.
I will say
all everybody was watching.
I am too old to know who the YouTube stars are, but I am not too old to think that they aren't important or don't matter or haven't made just bucket loads of money doing what they do. Like I do not scoff at the idea of a YouTube star because I know how much money is behind these guys now at this point. So I mean, I'm sadly kind of jealous. I've got the jellies, Andy.
Well, there are a few that I am vaguely familiar with just because of exposure through my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know if Charlie D'Amelio is still big right now, but her whole family ended up YouTube sensations.
No, I have read about them, but they've appeared on like normal, like their antics or whatever have appeared on regular news or something that the old people look at. But anyway, so we got some Russell Westbrook stuff that we want to get into, and we've got some reaction to a really good interview that Darvin Ham, lengthy interview that Darvin Ham did with the All the Smoke podcast, Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes. Some interesting stuff that came out of that we want to talk about. But first, Andy, Lakers made kind of a nice little move. It looks like, at least it was reported on Tuesday by Marc Spears at ESPN. They have given Phil Handy, who had 1 year left on his contract, a contract extension. So we're waiting around for Kyrie Irving. We're waiting around for Buddy Hield and Myles Turner, whatever it is, the roster to get set. Lakers made a kind of a low-key, very important move on their coaching staff, in their development and all that. Like Phil Handy is a big deal, and they clearly want to keep him around for a while.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, Brian, my first reaction was that's awesome because, as you said, Phil Handy is very important to this organization. He has a great relationship with LeBron, great relationship with AD. He gets along basically with every player in the league. And I know that he is considered important inside the building. He is the holdover from Frank Vogel's staff. But then I thought about it. I was like, I've never heard of an assistant coach getting an extension. Like, I can't recall that ever happening.
It probably has, but like, you don't care enough to pay attention to it necessarily, maybe.
Yeah, but like, you and I stay pretty up on even trivial matters in this league, but we will know pretty, frankly, unimportant stuff that goes on in the NBA. I don't recall an assistant coach ever getting specifically his own extension. Usually these guys are just picked by the head coach and kind of
they stay as long as as long as he's there.
Yeah.
What I know it's happened, but what I think it reflects is we have reached an era. I think this is definitely true, where people are paying far more attention to certain guys, what certain guys are doing, what they do as assistants, who is the lead assistant, who is that, that associate head coach. We saw what happened with Kenny Atkinson, who was going to become the next head coach of the Charlotte Hornets, and was like, I'm just going to stay and be Steve Kerr's lead assistant. And he got little bump, little YouTube style bump in his pay from the Warriors.
He's known as the Charlie D'Amelio of the NBA.
I'm sure that's exactly what they called it.
Oh yeah.
The only YouTube star that we can name.
You know what? There are a few others.
There's one. We have my kids have a sweatshirt of one of these guys, and we bought them for Christmas a couple years ago. And it's one of these one-word dudes, and I cannot for the life of me remember the guy's name.
There are others that I would recognize
really expensive sweatshirt
by sight, just from again, just proximity and osmosis through my daughter. There was one that we met at the Barnes and Noble in the Grove, and she could not have been any nicer to my daughter. She took a picture with her. Shout out to her. Cannot remember her name, but either way, yes, we're kind of stuck on Charlie D'Amelio for these jokes.
It's what we got. And so, we focus much more, like we are far more. I can't tell you what everybody on every staff does, but there's certain guys who, when teams have them, they get real money and they have a real influence. And Phil Handy survived the purging of a coaching staff, which is not normal. Most of the time the assistants go as well, and it is not a guarantee that he's going to stay here for the length of a contract extension, because his name is going to continue to come up as a potential head coach and all that. And the Lakers certainly would let him go do that. But the Lakers are at the very least making it harder for him to leave and showing him some love there. And I think want to kind of keep him on the same timeline as Darvin.
Or, Brian, Darvin's already on the hot seat. and they're already lining up.
He's his Jason Kidd.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
I'm just saying, this is so unusual. It makes you wonder if maybe the Lakers are already looking ahead to Darvin's eventual dismissal. They never keep a guy longer than a couple of years anyway.
It wouldn't be out of character. No. I'd like to think they've turned over a leaf here, but it would not totally
I need to see
be out of character for this regime. TikTok, Darvin. I haven't even coached. We haven't had a practice yet. All right. Well, I haven't seen a whole lot of improvement.
Wondering if the organization is putting him under a little bit more scrutiny.
Oh my God.
He can't coast anymore, is what I'm saying.
No,
Ryan.
I will tell you this. I was one of the things that stuck out to me about this, though, is I mentioned earlier that Darvin was on the All the Smoke podcast. It was a great interview with Barnes, our old friend Matt Barnes, and Steven Jackson. Those guys, it's a good podcast. Most people have, I think, discovered it by now. It's like the second most popular podcast in like all of sports.
But we passed them on YouTube.
Right. They just need to do better on YouTube.
Yeah. They smoke our downloads, but on YouTube they can't touch us.
No, we are kings, the kings of YouTube.
No, it's a good show.
So they noted, and this was actually before the news this week, that Rasheed Wallace Shams reported that will not be joining the staff. Darvin's he said on the podcast, got 2 more spaces that he can fill. And Rasheed Wallace has long been somebody who has been rumored to be part of that. Those guys lobbied really hard for Sheed to Darvin, in a way that made you think that those guys must have known something, because like you wouldn't think they'd put him in like kind of an awkward spot if it wasn't something that was going to happen. But those guys lobbied for Sheed for a very specific reason that I think is interesting when you think about some of Darvin's strengths as a coach. So I want to get into that next, because I do think it's pretty revealing about maybe why they kept Phil around, put a premium on keeping Phil there. So we'll do that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Doer, the sponsors of the Locked On Lakers podcast and just this show. These are our partners. They are also the purveyors of the world's most comfortable pants. Doer is clothing created with the belief that comfort and style and function, they all exist to complement each other in design. And that's why you can wear just a pair of Doer pants in the bike lane to work, then in a big work meeting, and then wear those pants out to dinner with friends to celebrate everything that you crushed in that meeting. That is the versatility you get with Doer. You don't have to lug around different changes of clothes anymore. Doer's also made, and this is great, this is something I really love being in partnership with, they're made from 95% natural fiber. So your clothing, unlike typical conventional performance clothing, which is like oil-based for the most part, gross, you are actually helping the planet out while you wear your clothes and look great. And
look at these people, Andy. The planet loves them so much. The planet is like sucking them into the atmosphere.
Yeah. I mean, look at
their
them.
Clothes are that light.
Those, you know what? They're not that hot in real life, but when they wear the Doer clothes, my God, they are attractive people. That's what the clothes do for you. So drop by the store if you can in LA, 170 South La Brea
This is them
Avenue.
Before they put the pants on.
Yes, I know. It's pretty amazing.
That's them after the pants.
170 South La Brea Avenue in Mid-City. Or you can order online, shopdoer.com. Either way, use the exclusive code for our listeners, the Locked On Lakers family, 15% off using Locked On 15. Again, Locked On 15, 15% off at Doer, D-U-E-R, shopdoer.com.
Yeah, these really are just incredible good staple items that you need in your wardrobe. BetOnline.net, Andy, I should tell people, and you, is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Check out, Andy, the constantly shifting choice for NBA champion based on where people think Kevin Durant is going to go. You can also find reviews, news of every league, including Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, combat sports, esports, even golf. They have that there, and with the exclamation point at the end. We are getting to that point of the year where it's almost fall, and it's like that's when stuff really cranks up with the baseball playoffs and NFL training camps have opened. So we're getting back into it to where you need the information that BetOnline can provide you. So head on to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, so Andy, when Jackson and Barnes were talking about Sheed, obviously these are guys who they know Sheed. I think certainly played against him. I think they may have played with him. Matt Barnes played with everybody. So, but they know him, they respect him. Darvin certainly was, which is one of the reasons that Wallace was so tightly connected to perhaps to fill one of those remaining seats. The reason that they advocated so much for him was based on their belief that Wallace was a great conduit in the locker room. One of those guys that when you have a mix of young players, when you've got veterans, star veterans, when you might be importing a mercurial personality in Kyrie Irving, you need that guy on the coaching staff who is a conduit from the players to the head coach. Somebody who is respected by everybody, doesn't BS, is a great. And what struck me about this was, in a lot of ways, this was one of the strengths of Darvin Ham. This is one of the things that people talked about with Darvin. And one of some things that Darvin talks about in himself. Go but listen to this interview. It is filled, the stuff he talked about with the Lakers, nothing new. We've heard it. But he tells tons of stories about his work with the Bucks and his role as a player and how he mixed and matched and how he talks to people and his relationship building. And you can tell me if you think this matters. When you become the head coach, that stuff is still remarkably important. Darvin Ham's ability to be, as he calls it, a straight shooter, somebody who doesn't BS, who's not here to play games and will tell you straight with empathy, with caring, with all that stuff, but will tell you straight, is critical as a head coach. But when you're the boss, it is a different deal than when you are an assistant, when you might be the guy who players can talk to when they don't want to go directly to the head coach. There is a certain distance that the boss needs to keep from things. And that will be different to me in Darvin's role as a head coach versus his role as an assistant. I'm wondering if you think that is true too. And then from there, do you think that has something to do with making sure that somebody like Phil Handy is around in some ways to kind of serve in that role because he is so well respected?
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, it's hard to say for sure with Darvin Ham because you never know exactly what his style will be as a head coach because we haven't seen it before.
Correct.
Like, and Phil Jackson as an example, and we covered Phil's teams for the last 5 or 6 years of his career with the Lakers.
Mhm.
Obviously there were guys on his staff, longtime people like Jim Clemens and Frank Hamlin that he trusted, and I know built relationships with the players. But Phil felt like somebody that really was more bufferless between him and his players. So you never know exactly how it's going to go. But generally speaking, I think you're probably right. Either way, I think you nailed it when you talked about the player relationships and why that is so important with Phil Handy specifically. Like even if Darvin doesn't have, say, as much separation as Mike Budenholzer had with some of his players, or sort of that wall that you're talking about in Milwaukee. And Darvin in this interview said that he was actually that conduit, like that specifically in Milwaukee. That was one of his jobs. It remains to be seen if he keeps it exactly the same way with that, I guess, that sort of proverbial distance. But
I don't
either
mean to cut
way,
you off,
though,
but it's not just Darvin's approach to the players; it's the way that players look at the assistant versus the guy who's actually. So all I'm saying there, some of those things are a little bit out of his control because of the nature of the job. Is all I'm saying.
it can't. I think it can be.
I think players look at you differently.
They might. I don't think they necessarily do. I think sometimes it depends on who the coach is and how much the players, they may respect that guy as they may respect him as, this is my boss technically. It is his job to ultimately put us all on the same page, to decide the things we're going to be doing, decide the rotations, etc. But I don't necessarily, for whatever reason, have a deep respect for him as an authority figure. Like I'll do what he asks, but the inherent respect isn't necessarily there. This was something that I think a lot of people thought could have been a possibility when Frank Vogel was basically told, you will put Jason Kidd on this staff, because he had no established relationship with LeBron. He had no established relationship with AD, but those guys, in particular LeBron, absolutely respected Jason Kidd. So you wanted to make sure someone like that is there. I'm sort of neither confirming or denying exactly what you're talking about in terms of a possibility with Darvin in that different role. It's honestly hard for me to say, having never seen him as a head coach.
Sure,
but either way,
this is less about Darvin than it is just about
Sure.
my general understanding and belief in how sort of power dynamics work in these.
Either way,
in these
I think
situations.
Either way, I think you are totally right about Phil Handy, and among the many things that the organization would find important about him, I think you're 100% right there.
Yeah, and I am. I'll be interested to see. Darvin mentioned these two spaces that he's got left on his staff. What exactly it is that they feel like they need to fill? Because it's interesting, you go back to his introductory press conference, Ham was pretty clear, like, I'm not a guy, he was very much patterning things after how they did it in Milwaukee, how he worked under Bud and all that. When one of the things that I loved about that was it was not reverential to the Laker way. It's like, no, I'm bringing my experience from other places and I'm going to try to reform this culture here in LA to where it needs to be. He has said, I'm not going to be a guy who has an offensive coordinator, who has a defensive coordinator, who has, everybody slotted into a specific job. But that doesn't mean that people don't have certain strengths, that they don't bring certain things to a job. And Darvin's job, in part, just like it is with players, to put them in the best situations, is to put his coaches in the best situations and exploit what they're best at in the interests of helping the team. It's just you don't want to pigeonhole people. So I'm really interested to see the names of the people they bring in, the personalities of the people that they bring in, and try to get a feel as things go on for what exactly it is that that guy fills, the role that that guy fills. And it's two spots, the lower level spots on the staff, but still very important.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to see what Darvin does because, I mean, you and I were both pretty vocal proponents when the Lakers were going through this coaching search of you should hire this guy. Like, this is the guy you should be going after. And it is because, in part in the interactions I had with him when he was on Mike Brown's staff about a decade or so ago, coaching the Kobe, Powell, Andrew Bynum for a little bit, then Dwight, Steve Nash. Like, I really found any interactions I had with Darvin very useful. I found his explanations always very clear, very easy to understand, as transparent as you can expect anybody in that role to be. But also, too, he's somebody that has built up so much respect around the league. He seems like somebody that a lot of people anticipate is going to be very successful in this role. And look, people can peg this stuff wrong. Everybody had Luke Walton as coach in the making, just absolutely ready to go. And as it turned out, I think that was more really just based off who he was as a player and the relationship he had with Phil Jackson than necessarily who he is as a coach, what we've seen. But I've got a pretty strong feeling that the vibe around Darvin and the assessments around Darvin are correct. So I'm just really, really excited just to see what it all looks like up close.
Yeah, for sure. There are two other things that stuck out. One involving a memory of the 2004 finals, which I thought was a fascinating observation that Darvin made. And one about, to your point, why you can believe Darvin, the confidence that he has, and he projects a belief that he will be successful in this job. Some stuff from that interview on All the Smoke came through there. So we'll do that next. All right. So, Andy, everybody knows, I think at this point, that Darvin was on that team in 2004 that beat the Lakers in the finals. That is how he won his ring as a player. And so the guys asked him about his memory of that series. And I thought it was really interesting, kind of a fascinating point, that the place that he went to wasn't, X's and O's. He said that the chemistry, the vibe with the Lakers was off, and they knew it, and they knew that they kind of exploited it. And it wasn't that guys were arguing on the court. It wasn't that they were sniping each other, but you could just see, as he put it, the little things that you do. You set a hard screen for someone, you sprint down the floor, you do whatever, the little stuff that you do, the Lakers weren't doing. When Shaq had the ball, Kobe kind of wasn't doing that stuff. When Kobe had the ball, Shaq wasn't doing that stuff. And they said they just knew that their vibe, meaning the Lakers, was wrong. And it was that's the place that he went. And then they talked about, like, Lakers had no answer for Chauncey and so on and so on. I thought it was, especially given who the Lakers might add to this roster, given how much turnover they've had and will continue to have over the next couple of years, really reassuring to see, like, how deeply he pays attention to that kind of stuff, to culture, to vibes, to stuff like that for the teams, both that he is a coach on, but also how in tune he is to what he's seeing from opponents. That's just, I think that's how he's wired. And when you talk about a team that needs a new culture and needs a new way of doing things, and a new way to be together, as players and coaches like to say, I came away from this interview incredibly impressed at his sort of intuitiveness in that way. It's certainly how interested he is in it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm going to be totally honest. it did not take a behavioral psychologist to pick up that the 2004 Lakers team were at odds with each other. If you ever read the Phil Jackson book, The Last Season, which most people remember as the book that Phil trashed Kobe, and there are elements of that in there, and they went far enough that Phil has said he felt bad about
went a little too far.
Yeah, I mean, he said that part of the reason he came back to the Lakers after that 1 year off was he felt that a lot of the image issues that Kobe was dealing with were in part, at least, the result of this book, that in hindsight, with a little time to cool down and some distance, he was like, I was unfair to Kobe in certain parts of this. And I felt like there was a need to make up for it. But some of the most interesting parts of that book was Phil just recounting what went on in that playoff run to the finals and, like the details of the tension of that whole season. And, there was just so much sniping back and forth, between Phil, obviously between Kobe and Shaq, but also Phil and Kobe, sometimes Phil and Shaq, sometimes the other guys sick of Kobe and Shaq, sometimes just the pressure cooker of everything that went on that season with Colorado alone. And, Kobe having to navigate that, the team having to navigate that. It was just an incredibly tense time. And by the time they reached Detroit, shorthanded, no Karl Malone, no Horace Grant, they just were on E in a bunch of different levels. Yeah. They're absolutely fried.
But you're sure. And I'm not saying Darvin didn't have a chance to read the book before the series started.
No, but he's had time to read it after. I'm not trying to discount that. I'm more just remembering what he's talking about. But Darvin's a smart dude. I mean, you can just hear it in interviews with him over the years, recently since becoming, a Laker. Also, too, I think to survive as a guy like him in the league.
This is where I was going to get,
to manage to carve out a long career, with a robust 3.5 points per game.
I believe it was 2.5.
Something like that. You got to be a people person. You have to be somebody that teams will say, you know what? We value what he will bring to the culture as a 12th man more than we value what this other guy who is 15% more talented or productive will bring on the court versus Darvin. And being a people person often means being observant.
Yes. Thank you. I'm so glad you said that, because that to me is the key part of it, is to be a culture guy. You got to see stuff. You got to recognize things. And when you're the star player, you don't have to see everything. Geez, we're going to get to Russ, I guess now for Thursday's show. I know you got a lot of things that you've been kind of thinking about and want to talk about, but Russell Westbrook for 90% of his career can get away with a lack of self-awareness and a lack of general awareness of all the stuff that's going on the court, true awareness of every little detail, in ways that Darvin Ham can't. If you're going to, he has to fill those cracks, but if you're going to be a culture guy, you got to be, I think that is such a great point that you make. And it is why it's one of the reasons that I buy the idea that he can be so successful, because he has spent his life in basketball seeing those details with people. And ultimately, this is a people management job. The other thing that, that really came through in this interview, last thing, we can end here. Everybody says, I'm confident that I can do well in this. Everybody says, I believe, and when we talk about Darvin, we tend to focus on the fact that he got shot in the face, and everything that happens after you get shot in the face is, I don't know. It seems easy, I guess, in comparison.
I don't know about easy, but it puts things in perspective in terms of just life in general. When you come that close to, I don't want to say Darvin was close to losing his life, but he was in a life-threatening situation.
It was pretty close. Inches, you get shot in the face, you're a couple more inches in one direction.
You're I just mean in terms of the actual effects from it, but it was a life-threatening situation, no doubt. And that will put certain things in perspective.
The thing that stuck out to me is why I believe, when a lot of people, when they say, I'm confident in my process. I'm confident in my beliefs and myself. And I don't care what people say about me, this and that, whatever. I don't believe them. I don't, because most people care deeply, not just about what the people who matter think, but the people who don't matter, what they think too. And they can find themselves influenced by the wrong things and the wrong people and whatever. And I left this interview, and I encourage people to go listen. You can find it on YouTube. I found it on YouTube, where Andy and I are the most downloaded people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, second most, Brian.
Second most. That's right. I don't want to make this a bigger thing than it is.
No. We're modest in our success.
When he talks about his process and the things that he's gone through and the grind and all of this stuff, I left it believing that Darvin cares only about the opinions of the people who genuinely matter. It's not that he doesn't care what anybody thinks. Nobody should care shouldn't care what anybody thinks, but you have to care what the right people think. And I really do believe that Darvin will be only influenced in his decision making by the people that he believes matter, and will choose those people wisely. And that is a really important feature of a head coach. Like, we go back to the Dodgers, like we covered Grady Little, who got so hyper paranoid about everything. He clearly was being influenced by people who did not matter. He was being influenced by people like us, asking him questions in the dugout and stuff like that before games. He should not have been. We don't matter in that sense. I think Darvin will respect the media. I think Darvin will treat us, as professionally as we should be. But I don't think he's going to be influenced by the wrong stuff. And that was the last thing that I thought was why I believed him when he talks about how this is a challenge and an opportunity, and he doesn't feel pressure from it.
Well,
I was very impressed in that way.
It's interesting you said that, because when I heard him say that he doesn't feel pressure, my immediate response was BS. Mm-hmm. Because every job has inherent pressure to it if you want to keep it. Like, there's no such thing as a job that you actually care about or that you actually need that has no inherent pressure to it. Like, that in and of itself, I don't find a believable scenario. But what I do believe 100% with Darvin, and this sort of speaks to the idea of what you were saying with being influenced by the right people or just sort of the right things, I do not believe that Darvin for a second is going to be intimidated by this job.
Right. And that's really what I'm getting at. Like, he recognizes that there is pressure, but he doesn't feel, I don't think he's going to be ruled by it in that way.
I don't think he's going to be bullied by LeBron or Russ or Team Clutch or, the front office
or Stephen A. Smith or, Marc Spears or anybody.
Right. The Locked On Lakers podcast, whatever. I don't think maybe, but I don't think he is going to be intimidated by anybody into not doing the things that he should be doing. He'll play a little bit of politics because that is part of this job if you want to be successful at it. Everybody plays politics with their stars as coaches, and you know what? They should. Mm-hmm. But I don't think he is going to be bullied into the politics that he does not want to do. And I think in this sense also, it's very helpful that he's been with this organization before. Yeah. So he has an idea of what it's like, and he went through it during, again, that period of Kobe and Pau and Dwight, Nash, Bynum before Dwight. Like, yes, the LeBron era is under scrutiny, but I'll tell you right now, it ain't nothing compared to Kobe Bryant still in his prime, still playing at a high level. That scrutiny, it ain't close.
Yeah. All right. So just go back and listen to it. Again, as a Laker fan, if you are somebody who wants to be reassured at the direction the Lakers are going, it's another hour where you come away impressed with the human being that is in charge of this roster right now. And he's an interesting and thoughtful guy. And it was a good listen. So go back and do that. It's a good podcast. Anyway, Locked On Lakers on YouTube, where you go to get this and you see it. And you can see things like 15% off when you use Locked On 15 over at shopdoer.com or at the store on South La Brea Avenue in Los Angeles. All right, we will see everybody Thursday talking about Russell Westbrook. Enjoy your day.